So this week, maybe we broke the rules, but maybe not. I think we're just making it even, really. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to week 4 of the Traxxas TRX-4 budget build. If you're not familiar with the budget build, what we're doing is we're taking a TRX-4 Sport unassembled kit version and we're upgrading it with $50 every week. Being that this was a kit version, we actually had to make it run as well. So we've done some of the electronics already, including servo, ESC, motor. We covered battery and servo at the very beginning. Those actually weren't included in the budget, but beyond that, we're really starting to kind of put this thing together. And right now, as this thing sits, it's drivable for me. You will see that since last time it does have some paint on it. Now this is the DIY week, and paint would have probably been a good idea of something to do DIY, except that I think I am the last person in the world you should take any sort of painting advice from, period. Now what you see here is a very nice but simple one color paint job. And by the fact that it looks nice, you can tell that that means I didn't do it. My coworker Brandon painted this for me, and I'm sure Matt is going to have something to complain about as far as that goes. But yes, it's a simple one color paint job. Later on down the road, we'll church it up a bit. But for now, one color. There it is. However, that is not the DIY section for this week. For the DIY, I didn't have any really good ideas, and I knew Matt was gonna do some tire modifying and things like that, and I actually have some slightly different plans as far as that goes. We already covered the DIY bumper mods that I did in the previous weeks, so I was kind of running short on things that I wanted to cover. But speaking of covers, the Diff Covers. The Diff Covers on the TRX-4 Sport are these very red plastic diff covers. And while I get the point of red diff covers, they look like a lot of the aftermarket diff covers, I'm just not a big fan of the red. And just, you know, I don't care for it. But I don't like spray painting parts. I think that spray painting parts looks cheesy, it flakes off too easy, it just looks bad, it looks like you spray painted your RC car. So spray painting parts like that, not gonna happen. So what I decided to do was dye them. And if you're not familiar with this, this is common in a lot of other areas of RC. If you've only been in this side of RC or you're new to RC in general, it's something that maybe you haven't done before. So this week, that was the DIY thing that I decided to do. And I'm gonna run through this process because it's not the most interesting thing in the world. And then we're gonna get to the next thing. So for this process, I used black RIT dye. Now, RIT dye is sold at the grocery store. It's fairly inexpensive, just a few bucks for a small bottle, and it comes in a bunch of different colors. Now, these are red to start with, so you might be able to change the hue of them and make them a darker, different color, but I wanted to just go black, so I picked up black RIT dye. You have to be super, super careful with this because it's a dye and therefore it dyes everything. Be careful. I think it's the best approach to hide what you're doing from your wife, your mom, your girlfriend, your sister, cousin. Just try and get this done without a lot of explaining. But since I was only doing a couple of diff covers, I just grabbed the smallest little saucepan and filled it about halfway up with water. Brought that water to a boil. While I was waiting for the water to boil, I did make myself up a makeshift tin pan just to put the plastic utensil I was scooping the things out with and just to not get that dye on anything else as best I possibly could. And then I added just too much RIT dye. It's black. I was going for as black as I could get, so just poured a bunch in. If you're going for a different color, something like that, using a more reasonable amount would probably be a good idea, but it's cheap and I just wanted to get it done. Make sure to wash the parts really well. If you have any grease on the back side, the RIT dye is not gonna go through that area. Not that it really matters on the back side, but of course on the front side, you wanna wash that as best as possible, just to make sure that it penetrates in as deep as it possibly can.
That's what she said.
Now that it's at a boil, basically just turned it down to low heat to keep some heat in the pan, but not having to keep it at a rolling boil or anything like that. Then I dropped my 2 red diff covers in there and walked away for 10 minutes. Being that I had it on low heat, I really wasn't worried about damaging the parts or anything like that, so I just let them sit in there, set a timer for 10 minutes, came back, scooped them out, and threw them into my makeshift tin pan, rinsed them off carefully, disposed of the evidence, and now I've got black diff covers instead of red. The nice thing about dyed diff covers is that it's a little bit more than just skin deep. So if you scrape these things, you're still going to have black under there. If you get too far down, you're likely going to get back to red, but at least you're going to have something a little bit better than just some spray paint. I actually took the diff covers off of my TRX-4 Sport mud truck just because I had the lift kit on there and they were way easier to get to than the ones in a normal TRX-4 Sport. So now I'm going to pop off the 4 screws on the back side of this axle and then get the black one swapped in there. So that's the process for dyeing RC parts. Again, you can use that for anything that's not black already. If you want to make something black, it's not that hard to do. If you want to take something and make it a color version, you usually need to start with a lighter plastic, preferably a white plastic, but grays will work and things like that. I looked at my budget and I had a little bit left over last week. Not a lot, but some. And Matt went over a pretty good amount on his. And since next week's one of our other special weeks, I figured I needed to make things even. So if we added what I had left over and what Matt went over on his budget, just to make things fair, I decided to buy something. And what I decided to buy was an Axial RR10 Bomber interior tray. Now, if you're not familiar with what this is, the Axial Bomber is a 2.2 rock racer style buggy that has a little interior in it. And I really like this interior. It's got a little bit of depth to it and it's just a good size overall. And I've found that it works really well to add to other bodies as a very basic interior. I'm not much of one to add full depth 3D styrene interiors. That's more Matt's side, and I appreciate what he takes time to do there. But for me, I just want something that means I can't see the battery when I look through the windshield. So these interiors work fantastic for that. But you can't just really put it in there and expect it to work.
That's what she said.
So what I decided to do was design up a couple of mounts in CAD and 3D print them. These mounts are going to make it very easy for us to bolt that interior into this body. Now, since the total of what I had left over and what Matt went over on his budget was about 20 bucks, and that's coincidentally what one of these costs, I picked that up. However, that didn't really leave any budget in there for buying the heads. So in the following week, we'll spend some money on finding helmets for this thing. Or if you know somebody who's got some dolls or action figures or things like that and you want to do some creative repositioning of their brain buckets, then another option for you also. And in the spirit of the DIY week, I have hosted these 3D printed files on Thingiverse. You can download them in the links below. These are very simple little flat brackets that I added kind of as a reinforcing rib on. Super simple in general, something you could probably do yourself if you really wanted to, but you don't have to, you can just download these. The file's free, and if you have a 3D printer, you can knock that out, or maybe you have a friend or know somebody or a school or a library or something like that has a 3D printer, then it's great, free for you, and just go at it. Otherwise, I will throw these up on my Shapeways store and you can buy them if you'd like. But let's jump into the installation of this interior into the vehicle. So we've got our clear RR10 panel here. And now, of course, I'm going to take this back out and paint it, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I get some driver heads. But for now, I'm just going to show you how I plan to install these 3D printed brackets that I made. The long side here with the 2 holes, that is what I plan to put on the body side. And the single hole on the short side, that is what's going to attach to this Bomber interior. Got a couple of pieces of 12mm hardware here. We're going to put the hardware through the top side of the Bomber interior. Depending on the tolerances of your 3D printer, the screw should pass through, but if you have to, you can thread it through. Even if it does thread into the plastic, I still suggest adding a lock nut to the back side. Get the brackets loosely firmed in place. They don't need to be overly tight. You don't need to add extra stress, but then just get the back side parallel with the back of the interior. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this and transfer it into the body. Get it placed into the body and get the holes centered. If you need to, you can adjust the angle. You just want to make sure that the screw holes are lining up on the rear flat portion of the bed. Then I'm going to take an 1/8 inch drill bit in my power driver and drill a hole. With one hole drilled, I'm going to take and put a screw through this mount and into the body just to keep everything in place so that the rest of my screws all line up. And now with the 2 screw holes made for both of the mounts, we can finish the last 2. So now I'm going to actually install the brackets. These are M3x12 screws, and I'm going to put them in through the top of the bed actually. And that's all we're gonna need to securely hold the back side of this interior. Super easy. Now the front side is a little bit different. There's not something super easy to hold things up here, so what I'll likely do is just add a little bit of Velcro to the inside. But I'm not gonna do that until after I paint it, because I wanna paint it on the inside, or the outside technically, I guess, and that will give it a more flat look. So I'm going to hold off on finishing with the Velcro until I get this painted. And the finished look is actually really good. I think it fits in this body better than any other body I've actually used it on. The width is really good. The dash fits almost perfectly with the body style. Being that this is a single cab truck, the drivers are in the right position. It just, overall, it looks like it was made for this body. Super happy. And now look who's the scale guy. I have an interior. Matt probably doesn't. I don't think he did this week. The center of the interior is basically resting right on that Traxxas battery strap system that holds the battery in place where it is. And that's when we're using the factory battery tray like we are currently. Later on down the road, that may change to something a little lower center of gravity, but for now, it still fits. So no matter what you're running, this should be an easy option for you. And technically, with it being held up like that, I wouldn't even need to add the Velcro, but I still will. But that makes this week pretty short and simple. Not much to it, but we're really starting to get there and make this truck look like something a little bit different at least. I like the look of the all black axle. I think it's just subtle, kind of hides in there a little bit better. You don't really notice that bright red plastic looking diff cover. So I think we're just making little steps at making this thing look more like our own. So this week, maybe we broke the rules, but maybe not. I think we're just making it even, really. You know, Matt went way over his budget, and we're just kind of reeling it back in, bringing him back into reality, making this a fair playing field. Like I mentioned, next week is another one of those special weeks, and for next week, we kind of get to, blind our eyes to the rules of this challenge and kind of step outside of it. And what we're gonna do next week is one of my favorite things to do on any truck. I'll just leave it at that. But for this week's question, I'll kind of just turn that right back at you guys. What is your favorite mod to do on any vehicle you buy? Doesn't matter. It's just the one thing you like to do to any of your cars. Whether it's putting your own favorite livery on it, or making it go faster, making it go slower, adding your own special type of scale accessory. Whatever it is, drop what your favorite mod is in the comments below. Just doing a quick run through of the budget again. We took what we had from last week left over, added what Matt was in the hole, put those two things together, and subtracted the interior. And I'd say we're pretty even Steven at this point. As always, guys, I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoy these videos, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, there's a button for that too. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you see the videos as soon as they get uploaded. See you guys next Wednesday again for another episode of the Traxxas Budget Build. See you Tuesdays for the Scale News Update. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.